Welcome to the Explainer. Today we're doing something a little bit different. We are stepping away from the usual spreadsheets and data points to deconstruct something, well, infinitely more complex. We're talking about the human heart. We are going to walk through a deeply emotional, chronological journey that comes from a completely remarkable story about devotion, sacrifice, and ultimate truth. It's the story of a young man named Ryan, his profound love for a woman named Emma, and a 15-year mystery that totally redefines what it actually means to hold on to someone. So, get comfortable, because this is going to be a heavy but incredibly beautiful ride.
So, imagine this for a second. What actually happens when the person you've promised your entire life to just vanishes? Poof, gone without a trace. It's a hypothetical for most of us, right? But this was the sudden, shocking reality for 19-year-old Ryan. Imagine being at the very beginning of your adult life, completely anchored by your love for another person, and then, inexplicably, they are just gone. It creates this massive, gaping emotional vacuum. To really understand the depth of Ryan's reaction to this trauma, we first have to understand the foundation of what he actually lost.
You see, Ryan and Emma had built their entire relationship on a single, unwavering promise. No matter what happens, we'll always be together. It was pure, it was optimistic, and it was absolute. It's the kind of fierce promise you only really make when you're young, spoken with complete, unquestioning certainty that the future is safe. I want you to keep this specific promise in the back of your mind as we move forward, because it is literally the anchor point for everything Ryan does next. The real tragedy here isn't just that Emma left, it's that her leaving completely shattered this unbreakable vow.
And the reality of Emma's disappearance was completely devoid of closure. We're talking no goodbye, no phone call, not even a quick message left behind. It wasn't a fight, and it wasn't a slow drift apart over time. It was sudden, absolute silence. For a 19-year-old guy holding on to that promise of always, this total lack of information is just devastating. Our brains desperately need a narrative to process loss, but Ryan was given absolutely nothing to work with.
Now you can probably guess how the town reacted. People were practical, if a bit harsh. They told him, just forget her, she's never coming back. Eventually, the whispers started, and they even began calling him crazy. And you know, society naturally expects us to just move on from unexplained loss. But Ryan flat out refused to listen. Because he had no answers, he clung to the absolute only thing he knew to be true, his original promise to her. Every single year, on the exact same date, he stood outside Emma's old house, holding a single white rose.
1 year, 5 years, 10 whole years. Listen, it is incredibly easy for us to just gloss over those words, but I want you to really think about the grueling, physical passage of time here. Think of all the life events, the changing seasons, the personal growth that happens in a full decade. People in the town laughed at him. They mocked this yearly ritual. But Ryan just absorbed all of that judgment and kept returning to that doorstep. He never missed a single year. The sheer weight of that kind of dedication is just staggering.
Which brings us to year 15. For 15 long years, the routine was exactly the same. The white rose, the empty doorstep, the deafening silence. Until the 15th year. When Ryan stood in front of that house, preparing himself for yet another year of silent tribute to a ghost, the unimaginable actually happened. The pattern finally broke.
This time, the door didn't stay shut. An old woman opened it. With tears in her eyes, she looked right at him and simply asked, "Are you Ryan?" Can you even imagine the shock? The massive rush of adrenaline after 15 years of absolute stillness? Ryan just nodded.
The old woman stepped back inside and returned holding a dusty envelope. She whispered to him that Emma had asked her to give him this, but only if he ever came back. 15 years of dust had literally gathered on a single piece of paper that held the answers Ryan had sacrificed his entire youth waiting for. The source notes actually mention that his hands were visibly shaking as he slowly opened the letter.
Inside was a completely devastating truth. Emma wrote, "If you're reading this, it means I couldn't keep my promise. The day I disappeared, I was diagnosed with a terminal illness." In just 2 sentences, 15 years of assumed abandonment are completely rewritten. Emma didn't stop loving him. She wasn't running away from him. She was handed a literal death sentence on the very day she vanished.
The agonizing why that had haunted him was right there in the ink. "I knew I didn't have much time. I didn't want you to watch me die, so I left without saying goodbye." This completely reframes her disappearance, doesn't it? It wasn't some act of cruelty or cowardice. In her 19-year-old mind, facing an unimaginable terror, she made the agonizing decision to endure her death entirely alone.
She vanished into silence as a desperate, heartbreaking act of protection, to spare the boy she loved from having to watch her fade away.
Emma was wrestling with this incredibly painful, deeply human contradiction. She wrote, "Every year I prayed you would move on and find happiness, but deep inside, I hoped you'd remember me." She wanted him to be free from the pain, to go out and live a full life. Yet, as someone facing the end of her own time, that very natural, deeply human desire to not be forgotten still remained. She was terrified of fading from the world, but equally terrified of trapping him in it.
But it's her final words that ultimately provide the key to Ryan's salvation. She says, "If you still love me, please don't spend the rest of your life waiting. Live the life I couldn't. Smile for both of us." Emma explicitly uses his love for her as the exact reason he must stop waiting. She gives him the ultimate gift, the explicit permission to let go. She transforms his perceived obligation from waiting on a cold doorstep to actually living a joyful, vibrant life on her behalf.
In a single, breathtaking moment, an incredible paradigm shift took place. 15 years of silent suffering, based entirely on the belief that he had been abandoned, just dissolved into this shattering truth. She didn't abandon him, not at all. She left because she loved him too much to put him through her pain. Ryan wept, suddenly realizing that the very silence that had tortured him for a decade and a half was in reality Emma's ultimate act of love.
So, how on earth does a person process a revelation like that? Well, the story tells us he looked up at the sky and smiled through his tears, honoring her request to smile for both of us. He placed that white rose on her doorstep one last time, no longer as a visual, but as a true final goodbye. And then he quietly walked away. No more waiting.
And that brings us to the core theme of this explainer: closure. True closure is the act of finally walking away, not because the love is somehow gone, but because the promise has actually been fulfilled. For 15 years, Ryan thought fulfilling his promise meant physically waiting at that house. But Emma's letter showed him that keeping their promise actually meant living a full, beautiful life. When he finally walked away from that doorstep, he was, as the source so perfectly states, finally free.
We've unpacked the timeline, the tragedy, and this profound shift from perceived abandonment to ultimate sacrifice. Ryan's story is a powerful reminder that sometimes the absolute most profound act of devotion isn't holding on forever. It's having the courage to finally release your grip. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a question to really reflect on today. If true love means letting go, what are you holding on to? Think about it. Thanks so much for learning with me today.